Hey guys, Stealth here. A new video in the series of notable units. This time we're looking at Canada. Now Canada by itself doesn't have a lot of units. You usually don't see Canada operating on its own in Wargame Red Dragon, but you do see them as part of the Commonwealth. This video I'm going to be looking specifically at Canada, so it's not going to be a very long video because Canada doesn't really have a lot of units in their deck. That doesn't mean to say though that they are bad units. They have some very nice units and they're a pretty well-rounded army. So let's have a look what kind of notable units these guys have to offer. Starting off with the Grizzly CP. If you compare the Grizzly to the Iltis, you can see that it is a nice upgrade. You got the Iltis, this is my most used command vehicle, the Iltis CP. The Germans use a similar version of it. It's a very speedy off-road Jeep, a very speedy off-road CV. Nothing special there. But the Grizzly is nice because it's for 15 points more a vehicle which is just as fast, has medium optics and has some armor. This is only for 125 points, and if you're playing with a dedicated Canadian deck, these guys give you 6 units for 1 card. And for that you have a nice upgrade over the CP, which is unarmored, and of course that means that it is even more vulnerable to artillery. Now the Grizzly does come with a machine gun, but of course that is not something you have to rely on when you're using a CV. If you're playing it right, the CV will never ever come in contact with other units, so you won't need to use that machine gun. What you might need to use is the amphibious availability, or the amphibious ability of this unit. So keep in mind that you can actually use this unit to cross rivers quickly and come into command zones from an unexpected region. So use the amphibious ability of this truck and make it your tactical advantage. Killing these things, very easy. Any kind of unit can do it. Moving on to the infantry tab. I wanted to highlight quickly the AROCs unit. This is the AROCs 5-man ATGM squad. But it's the only ATGM that Canada really has that is longer than 875 meter range. That is also immediately the weak spot for the Canadians. They don't have any ATGMs on their infantry, which are the normal ATGM range of 2450 or 2600. So this is something that you will really have to work with if you're playing Canada. But in return you get the AROCs, and you get this on the AROCs fire support teams, all as they class them fire support squads, and you get them on the Highlanders. Now these fire support squads only cost you 15 points, and you get 8 launchers for the AROCs of that. And out of those 8, a lot of those will hit. Now that does not make the AROCs squad very special, but they have a very high epi power, and that is something that for 15 points can make you a lot of points in return. If you, for example, engage 3 tanks for 50 points each, and you kill them with this AROC squad, you just made 10 times the worth of this unit, and that for me makes it a notable unit. The ability to earn itself back this quickly and to make that many kills does really earn itself a spot in the notable slots. The problem is they don't have a lot of range, so in order to get those points you will have to get close with these guys. And that means using them in ambushes, using them in towns, and making sure that if they got spotted in a location where they're not secure, run. Don't even try to fight, just run. They're a 5-man squad, and as with most infantry, they are very vulnerable to mortar fire and other artillery fire, but especially these guys, since they're a 5-man squad, go down very easily. It's pretty much the same recipe you always use against infantry: IFVs, autocannons, grenade launchers if you can find them, napalm, bombers, helicopters, the whole 9 yards will do. The problem is that the AROCs is still quite deadly at 1000 meter range, which is where most autocannons are best used. And even some of the heavy machine guns from the Russians don't go any further than 1050 meter range. So if you're engaging a unit like the AROCs with an APC or IFV, be careful, don't get close. And this also covers the AROCs for the Highlanders. Now the Highlanders are classed as a rifle team. You could say that these guys are the standard infantry for the Canadians, but the difference with normal infantry is that they don't carry an RPG. Instead they carry 10 launchers of the AROCs, which puts them on the same kind of plane as the French Legion, the Legion 90 to be precise, which also carry the AROCs, and this means that they have a nice standoff capability. So park the Highlanders off the edges of your town and use these guys to kill anywhere between 6 and 10 tanks with the excellent AROCs launcher. Killing these guys, same way, same deal. High HE, stay at range, don't get closer than 1050 if you're using a vehicle. Helicopters, rocket pods and mortars. Moving on to support, where we have the Wolverine. Now this unit was introduced in the second DLC, if I recall correctly. I did a video on it back then. The specs might have changed a little bit, I'm not too sure because I've not used this thing since. But the Wolverine is a nice anti-air unit. For 35 points you get a javelin mounted on a Wolverine, so it's a very mobile vehicle. And like the AROCs, these guys can earn themselves back pretty quickly. They don't have a very high HE power, it's just a man-pads mounted on a Wolverine truck. But what they can do for you is quickly fire these things, because they fire them in bursts of, I believe, 2, maybe even 3. So they can quickly score 3 or 4 choppers and get the hell out, using that 100 kph off-road speed. Good air detection means that they can see the enemy coming at good range, but they might not always be able to engage it at that range, because the range against helicopters is only 2450. To kill these things, you just bring a tank. These things have very soft skins, 2 frontal armor, 2 sides, 1 back and 0 on the top. So if you can land some mortar shells on top of it or a tank shell to the front of it, you will kill this unit. But just don't use helicopters, because if they wander too close they might actually get killed by the Wolverine. Talking about anti-air, we got the ADATs. And the ADATs is something, it's one of those unique units that can do everything. They can engage ground targets, helicopters, airplanes, the whole range of targets. I'm not sure if they can actually engage infantry, because I rarely ever use the ADATs. But with their 7 HE power and 25 AP power, they are definitely a big threat to both helicopters and tanks. So that is something that the ADATs does very well. The flip side to the ADATs is that they are not very well armored. So if you want to use these things, for example, as anti-tank weapons, which they can do, you do need to use them as ambushers, and you need to keep them at that 2800 meter range. If you manage to get a tank anywhere close to this thing and it fires once or twice, your precious 90 point ADATs is gone. And that is quite the waste of such a very nice weapon system. This is also, by the way, one of the few anti-air missile launchers that the Canadians get. They got the Wolverine, as I just discussed, they get the Marksman, the Centurion Marksman, and they get the ADATs. If you lose 1 or 2 ADATs, that is extremely detrimental to your anti-plane capability, because there are not a lot of units in the Canadian deck which can effectively fight those. So be very careful when using your ADATs, but park them in strategic locations where they can engage both ground targets and air targets, and especially sniping long-range helicopters like Akulas or Mi-28s with this thing is really a pleasure. If you spot one of these things, make sure you engage it with infantry or at long range with an ATGM, although good luck finding anything at 2800 meter range on the ground. An airplane would be best, but again, airplanes will take fire. So the safest way to get rid of these guys is by using artillery or by using infantry. If you can get either of those onto this target, you should really easily kill this thing. In the tank section, there are not a lot of tanks to talk about. They have important sub-tanks from Great Britain, where they have the Centurion line. They got the Centurion Mark V AT, which carries some SS-11 ATGMs, and they have some imported Leopards from Germany. The one I wanted to talk about is the Leopard C2 Mexas, and it's a notable unit because it sits somewhere between a Leopard 1A5 and a Leopard 2. It has the Leopard 1A5 values for accuracy and stabilizer, But the Leopard 2 value for armor, especially frontal armor, is very good. And you can see that this thing is just a very well armored Leopard 1A4, 1A5. That means that for 75 points you do get a decently armored tank, but it will not go toe to toe with some of the super heavies. This is the most heavily armored tank that Canada gets, so make sure you use these things in the right application. And by right application I mean use them against tanks which do not have very high AP power, so light to medium tanks. Use them at range, don't let the enemy get too close because then your 14 frontal armor is not going to be enough. And make sure that you use these guys to support your infantry. If you can support your AROCs launchers, for example, or your infantry at range with these guys to make sure that the AROCs don't have to fire at APCs or IFVs, you can make sure that the AROCs then take out the tanks for you with their 25 AP power. Killing a Leopard C2 Mexas is pretty much the reverse of what I just described. You just make sure you get close enough. And if you get close enough to this tank, you're going to easily penetrate its front or even its side. The 15 AP power will mean that you will need something that can stand that, or that you stay outside the range of this 2275 meter gun. So an ATGM will do, helicopter mounted, airplane mounted, infantry mounted, whatever you like and whatever you have available will kill this tank. They're not that expensive, so it won't net you that many points. But these guys can still really annoy you because they're pretty mobile, 60 kph off-road, and that means that they can pop up in unexpected places. So you will need to want to take these guys down before they do some sort of flanking maneuver on your precious heavies. Moving on to Recon. As far as I'm concerned, not a lot of interesting units here. You got the Ferret Mark 1 imported again from Great Britain. You got a Iltis Scout, which is just an open version of the Iltis. Exceptional optics, but many more countries have that. And really the only interesting unit that I could find here is this two-man recce team. This reconnaissance sniper team will make sure that you have eyes on the battlefield without these guys being detected. If you're playing a pure Canada deck, you can deploy 6 of these at veteran or 4 at elite. And this goes down a little bit if you're using some of the coalitions. So if you're using, for example, the Commonwealth, you will not have as many as these as you would normally when you play Canada only. Now, what is special about the recce? They're just a regular sniper team, right? Exceptional stealth, very good optics, good speed. Yeah, that's true, but they do have a 50 cal sniper rifle, and that means that they get 1 AP power. And with 1 AP power, you can snipe a command vehicle at 1.5 kilometer range. So if enemies are parking their command vehicle in a position where these guys can get eyes on it, they can usually snipe at it too. And that is very, very useful because you both get information about where the enemy is, so that you can engage it either with artillery or with the sniper team themselves. Now, countering these guys, napalm is the best way to go, or use other infantry, but make sure that those infantry guys can get in quick, because the sniper is going to tear that infantry squads to pieces. So either bring multiple squads or use a napalm vehicle, like a napalm tank or a napalm bomber. Helicopters are also very, very effective at hunting these guys down, but keep in mind that 1 AP power, if it shoots back at your helicopter at 595 meter range, can actually crash that thing. So use a group of helicopters, I'd say MI-8Ts with rocket pods would be ideal. Make sure that they have a recon with them, otherwise they are probably not going to notice the recce. So if you're dealing with these guys, good hunting. Moving on to the vehicle tab, and again, not really a lot of interesting units here. Most of these units from Canada have the feature that they are quite fast. They are mostly based on wheeled vehicles, and that gives them a good off-road speed. So if you're playing Canada, make sure that you use this maneuverability on the tow vehicles, on, for example, the Cougar, which has a nice gun on it. The Leopards are pretty maneuverable, so use the quick maneuverability of this deck to flank the enemy. One unit that is completely opposite to that is the Chimera, and that is a notable unit for the Canadians because it's basically an old tank destroyer. but it is still a threat on the battlefield. These things have 20 frontal armor. They have a 19 AP power gun with 60% accuracy. They carry 30 rounds, so that could be better. But with 60% accuracy, you can expect to kill about 15 to 20 tanks. And 19 AP power will make sure that these things really start to hurt tanks. Their rate of fire is not great. Their maneuverability, again, not great, 50 kph, and they have poor optics, so that is a weak spot for this unit. But if you park these things in a bottleneck position, for example at the end of a valley, where the enemy has to come through in order to get to your base, you have an excellent ambusher, and it is basically a mobile bunker. These things are pretty hard to kill, that is, if you're engaging it from the front. If you're faced with killing a Chimera, make sure that you use an ATGM, preferably mounted on a helicopter or a plane, to make sure that you can cut through this 20 frontal armor, or come in from the sides or back to do a little bit, to have to deal with a little bit less armor. Infantry is also a good option, but keep in mind that this gun can fire and hurt your infantry. So if you want to use infantry, try to do a flanking maneuver on the Chimera, try to hit the sides, which are still extremely heavily armored, and attacking it from the back for infantry would be ideal. Artillery against this unit is not going to be very effective because of this heavy armor, both on the fronts and the sides. So you're going to need a lot of artillery to actually kill this thing. Now if you're playing Canada or Commonwealth, if you make a combination of a Chimera, a Recon unit, like for example this Recce team or Pathfinders, and you put a Wolverine, a Centurion Marksman or an ADATS with it, you have a very solid small task force which can completely lock off an area. That way the enemy cannot engage this Chimera with the ATGM planes, with the ATGM helicopters, and you have a pretty solid defense. So use 3 or 4 of those units together and you have a small task force. Moving on to helicopters. The only notable helicopter I could find was the CH-118 gunship. Now you might think, why is this interesting? It's just a minigun with a bit of rocket pods, right? True, but the rocket pods don't fire HE, they fire AP power, and that makes it a bit different. Because most rocket pods fire HE and don't do a lot against vehicles. They will stun the vehicle, they will do some damage to it, but these things can actually cut through the armor on the side of a tank if they fire enough of these rockets, and they have 14 of those with a 40% accuracy. If they fire enough of those, the tank will actually die, and that means that these are pretty dangerous units if used correctly. Please don't let me catch you using these things head on to kill a T-90, because you're going to need all 17 of them to actually do a lot of damage. Try and flank weaker units, or units which have strong armor on the front but weaker armor on the side. If you do that, and if you can cut through that side armor using its 2 AP power, you can actually kill very, very costly units for the enemy. Since these rocket pods are firing heat, they are always going to do some damage. So if you manage to form up, say, a squad of 3 or 4 of these guys and fire at some high-priced tanks, you will kill them. Because unlike AP power, which might just bounce off of the enemy tank, these guys will actually always do some damage. And that means that they are a notable unit, because you might underestimate them, and if you do, your T-90, your T-72 BU, or your precious T-80 might actually start to regret that. Killing these things is easy. If you use a SPOG, if you use manpads, you're going to easily take down this helicopter because it has 0 armor and only 4 strength, which is really on the low end of the helicopter spectrum. These guys are not made to take fire, they're made for quick runs at weaker units which are without AA, and if you use them as such, you can really easily take down some armors. If you don't use them as such, you can see your CH-118 gunships quickly dropping from the skies. So if you're playing Red 4, keep in mind that these units can be dangerous, but if you escort your expensive stuff with a SPOG or some manpads, you're going to really easily take down this unit. Now, other helicopters in this section are just helicopters which are armed with rocket pods, like the CH-135 gunship, or the 118 S11, which comes with this terrible ATGM, 30% accuracy, 20% stabilizer, 17 AP power. This is definitely not a notable unit. Airplane wise, I could not really find any interesting units here. You get the Voodoo, a small, cheap anti-air superiority fighter, without ECM, I should add. You get the Starfighter, again, multi-role aircraft armed with rocket pods. You get the Freedom Fighter. This is a bomber. Nothing special here, it just drops 3 500 kilogram bombs, not a notable unit. I do like the Hornet, but it is not very notable. It is just a multi-role aircraft which drops 8 cluster bombs. You get the 188 Hornet, which fires at airplanes with both fire and forget and semi-active missiles. And finally you got the electric Voodoo, which is a seaplane. But again, I don't really find these units that interesting. They are just a seaplane, they don't have any exceptional range. They do have quite the high ECM for only 90 points, so that is nice. But otherwise, I don't think this is a very notable unit. So there you have it. Not that many notable units in Canada, but that does not mean that they are not a force to be reckoned with. If you think that I overlooked any of the units that the Canadians have to offer, please let me know in the comments. I always look forward to hearing from you and to improve my deck descriptions. If you have a good comment, I will definitely add it in the description, and I already have done so for the last couple of notable unit reviews that I have done. Hope you enjoyed this video. If it taught you something, and if you learned something new about how to kill these units, or if you think, hey, I want to give some of these Canadian units a try, go ahead and please let me know by liking the video. If you want to see more notable units, I'm going to be covering all of NATO and all of Red 4. So just subscribe to the channel and I'll keep you updated with new videos. Thanks for watching. See you next video.